Hello, everyone. We'll wait just a couple of minutes for other folks to get logged in. Feel free to say hello in the chat and drop where you're joining from. I can start.
I see a picture of Brian Maloney with Grasson behind him, so the Canadians are here. The Canadians are here.
Well, look at the great grass growth we have too up north, eh? Isn't that
Wow.
awesome?
Wow. You're so pretty.
Oh yes, Mr. Sexy Shirt.
Hey, my grandkids made that for me. That's a good
Aww.
pop camping grass shirt.
All right. I'm going to start recording. Wonderful. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Goodweiler, and I'm joining you today on behalf of the National Grazing Lands Coalition. If you don't have much context on our organization, we are producer-led and producer-focused. We're thrilled to have you here today for a conversation on Let's Talk Grazing 101 with Tom and Troy, also known as TNT. They're going to be dynamite. Today, Tom Shea, he's NatGLC's North Central Region Resource Manager, and Troy Bishopp, also known as the Grass Whisperer, he is NatGLC's Northeastern Region Resource Manager. Before we get started, here we are, we're recording. This will be sent out to all those that registered and also posted on YouTube. Please use the chat today for any questions and comments throughout the webinar. This webinar is geared to have a conversation with around the fundamentals of grazing management. We will have a dedicated Q&A time towards the end of some brief conversation, and we'll encourage you to join in. If you have any audio or video issues, try leaving and rejoining, or you can check your device settings under the Teams menu. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom to help us frame today's fun conversation. Tom, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. So Troy and I were talking about what we wanted to do for a webinar, and we were talking about let's do Grazing 101. And in that conversation, we got into this nitpicky argument about what is Grazing 101. And we ended up thinking that most people don't start with Grazing 101. They start at 501 or way ahead of at the very beginning. So we wanted to really bring it back. So with that, I wanted to ask Troy, how did he start grazing and why did he start grazing? He's got a lot more experience based on the gray hair that he has in his beard. So I wanted to start out with Troy. What was it like to graze dinosaurs?
Oh, you youngins, you're so cute. Honestly, the Grazing 101 was more of doing 101. I just jumped in, thought it was a good idea because we had a farm already. There was grass here. So we started with chickens, we started with cows, and there wasn't really a whole lot of goals or planning. We just wanted to raise something. And way back in dinosaur days, there was a thing that got started back in the late 80s. It was called a low impedance fence charger. And I can remember my grandfather and myself freaking out that a Gallagher fence charger cost $300. We were almost like off our rocker buying that at that time because you could buy something for like $50. So that really set us on a path. But we, like everything else, we started small. and we just started doing. We didn't have any real plans. We didn't have no goals. We just needed something to do, I guess, fill our day, and it was good for the kids. But I'm a farm family, so that's sort of what you do. If I was not a farm family, I'm not quite sure what that would look like. That's why I'm asking you, Tom. How do you think you should start grazing? For you youngins, you're still just off the bottle.
Yeah, so I guess I don't necessarily know how everyone should start grazing, but I'll talk about how I started grazing. And I think it's a good starting point for most people, depending on their situation. So unlike Troy, I didn't grow up in a farming family or even in a place that you could farm. About as far away from that as possible. My mom's from New York City. I grew up outside of New York City for the most part and in North Carolina on military bases and had zero agriculture context until high school. I decided I wanted to start riding horses and realized that not only riding horses was expensive, but the really expensive part was feeding them. And started coming up with in my head, like, how do I make this cheaper? And I was like, well, grass is just growing there. That's cheaper than buying hay. That's just harvested grass. And around that same time, a TV show came out. I can't remember if it was Discovery or an Animal Planet called The Last American Cowboy, which followed three ranching families and what they were doing on their different operations. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do. So that leads me to how did I start and where do I think people should start is education. I got a degree from NC State from in animal science. But I don't think education is just university. I think it's field days, workshops. And in that process, I had internships. I've had internships with great mentors that led me to where I'm at. And then that led to managing livestock operations. It's a lot cheaper to try to manage somebody else's operation than it is to start your own. And since then, moving around, I chose small ruminants, so sheep and goats, because the land dictated that's what I could raise. And what I mean by that is that I don't have acres and acres. I live on a 25-acre farm. I can't be profitable in any, there's zero chance I can be profitable with cattle on 25 acres. I can get pretty close to profitability with sheep because I can raise more sheep on that same amount of land. And where I live in Minnesota has a high value on those animals because of the populations that live in the city. So that's how I started grazing and kind of where I'm at now. And really would like others to follow suit and starting with education by coming to webinars like this or field days and workshops.
Cool.
So
Can we
Troy
talk about
kind
why?
of,
Can we talk about why?
yeah. I think when you ask, can we talk about why, it's not like why am I grazing, but it's what's the purpose of it, right? And I think that's where everyone needs to start. You just can't go out and buy livestock and put them in a pasture and be like, all right, I'm doing this now. You have to understand the purpose or why you're doing it behind it. I do it honestly kind of for the love of the game. I just enjoy doing it. I find it peaceful. I find it cathartic. Working from home, I spend a lot of time inside. So it gives me a chance to go outside and do something and kind of, just get out there and start doing. And then also I'd like to be able to pass on the education. Like I think that education being the foundation, but where do you go to get that? So I like to host field days at different ranches and stuff like that and hope to get my own operation to the point where I can host field days. So that kind of rolls into Troy. Why is probably the first step in grazing when you started grazing operation, but what do you think are the first steps?
I mean, I'm I'm I wasn't profitable. I didn't even think of it. I just wanted to raise animals and eat. So I like to eat. So grass, animals eating grass, it was a good way to produce food. That was the first really why or goal is, you want to, if you're going to have land, you want to put food in a freezer of some sort. And since I've helped a lot of folks start their grazing journey, I always keep asking them, that seems to be for me the minimum that I would accept from the land. Like, start small and feed yourself first, get some experience. I never really thought about the why. I was more of a doer. I said, well, if I start small and it doesn't work out, I can always eat them. And and then the second thing that has happened is we use livestock and grazing to pay our taxes. So there's like eating, pay your taxes, and then see what the land will do. But right now, I ask why a lot because people go and do stuff, and it becomes very expensive. And I think that you had said you know some customers that they went out and did stuff, and then they got so stressed out that they basically crashed and burned. Isn't that balance important? That work-life balance?
Yeah, I think looking for work-life balance, if you're not already in agriculture industry and you're thinking about getting into it, you need to have a long conversation about work-life balance with everybody that's going to be involved. Um, do you and your family enjoy going on vacation? Do you and your family live close to each other? So, for example, I live in Minnesota. My parents live in North Carolina. My in-laws live in New York. We're out here by ourselves, so we have to take into account, even to do holidays, what does that look like for raising the animals? Um, Thankfully, in the last 5 years, there's a lot of technologies that have come out that can help with that work-life balance. There's systems out there to monitor your waters. There's systems out there that will virtually move your cows with virtual fences to keep that pasture rotation without someone having to physically do it. Because up until that point, you had to hire somebody and pay them to come manage your farm or your operation the way that you want to. And in my experience, no matter how much you trust that person, they never manage it exactly how you had in your head. And then there's usually a dumpster fire that comes back that you come back to. So then you're stressed out on vacation. So you need to understand that, are you going to have enough animals to be profitable, to have a work-life balance? Are you spending 8 hours a week on a lawnmower anyway? So would you be better off spending 8 hours tending to animals? I think that's a big focus, especially if you're getting into it.
I think this conversation people struggle with because they want to, like me, they want to do. They don't want to talk about goal setting and planning. That's like, yeah, I know that. What they want, I don't know how many. I have the question. I bought some animals. Now what do I do? Or I got this piece of land. I heard I could make money with it. Can you come and help me figure that out? And when you sit at the table and you do it's sort of it's not a grazing plan. It's more of a business plan with grazing as the forage base. You start crunching numbers on a small scale. It usually doesn't pencil out, but it's a good start. But I keep asking these questions. So what do you want to do this for? Do what are you going to do in the winter? Are you going to raise them? So the pre-grazing 101 questionnaire is stressful because everybody wants to get at it. But it'd be better to have a few things in the docket instead of just going off and spending a bunch of money, because right now, even if you wanted to steer, if I wanted to raise a steer right now, I'd have to spend $3,000, $4,000. That's a big investment
Yeah, and
versus
your investment
something
doesn't
else.
even just stop there. You're looking at fences, you're looking at, you know, infrastructure that a lot of people don't think of. Waterers cost a lot of money, fences cost a lot of money. Um, you know, on a larger operation, it pencils out to get a cattle working facility. And people are like, oh, I don't need a cattle working facility. My cows are just out there. And a lot of times, we're thinking in fair weather right there. Like, what happens if your cow gets sick? You have to have a veterinarian come out, or you have to treat it somehow. What are you going to do? I know from super fun experience of breaking my hand in half and doing stuff, tying it to a tree is not the best answer. So there's a lot more to it than just I bought an animal too, right, Troy?
Yeah. Do you so when somebody asks about a grazing plan or like getting started, where do you generally where do you go? Because a lot of times folks don't really know what their land produces. They have a sense, but unless they have a mentor or somebody they know in the community, how do people get started in knowing what their land produces, and you know trying to figure out how many animals the land base will provide? What's your ingredients for that conversation?
I think one of the very first things that you need to do is get out there and walk around. Depending on the size of the piece of the parcel that you're looking at, either um, actually physically walking it or going slowly through an ATV, or riding on a horse through the property. Get out of your pickup truck, see what's going on. And I think the next part is doing soil samples. So, Troy, like when you're walking the land, what are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for context for one. um I know some folks are on here. I know Nick is on here. He's got goats, pigs, I think he's got chickens. So, walking land in that context and walking it with the owner, looking for opportunities. I like to look at, what's the water, look down. How is the ground hard? Is there anything growing? Um, the interesting part about walking land with somebody that the interesting part is, even for me, is when you walk land with someone, you might look at the same thing and never see anything. And you walk with somebody else and they see the opportunities. Um, Even to the effect of, I like to know where the sun is coming up and the sun is setting and where the wind is blowing, just the orientation of, shelter for the animals and things. And so, and then, where would you put a paddock? Uh, there's so many questions and observations. Walking the land, that to me is the only thing, is paramount to starting this grazing journey. And walk it with a friend, or walk it with somebody you trust, or um, because you're never going to see all that you can see. Um, and I like walking land with other people because they have a different context, especially someone that doesn't have maybe all the animals. They're more environmental, so they start to look at tree species, they look at birds and habitat, and I'm like, yeah, who cares? I want to, I want to graze this grass and feed myself. So having a diversity of people walking the land is fantastic.
So when you're walking the land with the people that you've invited out to your place, or you're at somebody else's place, how did you learn about what questions to ask or what things to look for?
Oh, hard knocks, practice, right? Yeah, there's a vernacular. You, it would be fun to, what questions would you ask with not quite as much experience? But then that experience might be biased, right? So if you don't have as many biases, it might be a better walk with you because your mind is a little clearer. Some folks say I'm a little pessimistic, and I say stop. Well, okay. I'm more realistic. I'm always trying to ask. So what do you want to do again? How do you want to do this? Do you want to graze year round? Where are you going to barn these animals? All those scenarios should be in the Grazing 101 queue before you really buy any animals or do anything. Like, just keep playing the scenarios, but walking the land and reading it and what it tells you really is the start of this grazing journey. And I don't think folks necessarily value that, but I think you and I do.
Yeah, I would agree that walking the land is really important and it's probably undervalued. And that's honestly how I feel about the education side of things. Um, a wise man learns from somebody else's mistakes. Walking the land with somebody like you, Troy, you have 40 years of experience. Experience, in my opinions, is a whole lot of mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes. And walking the land with you helps somebody that's getting started or doesn't have as much experience to not repeat those same mistakes. So they don't have to start at zero. And that's why finding mentorships and workshops and education is so important to me. And I think a great way to do that is programs like NatGLC, but even on the local level, every state has an extension service. Um, have you worked with those other services, soil, water, extension previously? Um, or were you solely the School of Hard Knocks?
No, I had my people. And of course then I became one of those people. What's frustrating a little bit, and it's not so much now because the internet is, full of answers and information, is finding the right kind of help. So finding someone in your lane potentially, or so, mirroring someone, like I want to raise sheep, so I'm going to mirror Tom. Um, it, I think that's important because a lot of folks tell me, well, I read a book and it told me to do this. Or I went to that, I heard you can make money at this. I went to that seminar or whatever, and I'm like, was it in your context? And a lot of times it isn't. So finding the right kind of help is sort of on the farmer rancher to do that, right? Um, and that's the beauty of the folks on the call tonight and out there in America is, when you talk to people, you learn what they know. And so if someone has a question about sheep, or horses or whatever, I know who to, I don't know all the answers. And it's very easy to suggest they call you Tom or Abby or Brian or Bill Fox, or someone that has the right information. And then reading the question and the people is a skill. We're still, the internet's great, but there's still a lot of social skills, and I think yesterday I got 3 calls and I didn't know the answers, and I sent them off to people that knew the answers in their context. So that's just as important as giving information, as giving the right information.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
I
One of
feel
the
good
things
about
that
I ranted there.
no, I
Yes.
completely agree with you. One of the biggest things that I struggle with, and it shows the years of experience difference, is your people are reading books, my people are watching YouTube. Um, and I get people all the time like, hey, I'm doing this thing because I watched this guy on YouTube do it. And it's like, that's great. Somebody doing something in California on YouTube probably does not apply to Minnesota. Probably doesn't apply to North Carolina. Those principles might be the same, but you can't directly copy it. And I think one of the most important skills that we teach in courses through NatGLC all the time is, both as a technical service provider or as a farmer or rancher, you have to be able to know when to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that will save you as a technical service provider. It'll save you face. It'll save you a client. But as a farmer, taking the time to say, I don't know, could save you thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. It's a hard skill. Like, no one wants to admit that they don't know.
It's not hard for me. I don't know diddly half the time. I can't even make it up, but I usually know the folks that do, and that's as valuable or more actually. And then there's that if someone is interested, I know I've done it hundreds of times, is go over and talk to Brian about he's doing similar things to what you want to do. Go there. Here's his address. Buy some beef from the farm. Give him a call. Schedule a time. Go in the field and see the people. Don't take my word for it. And then, of course, after 40 years, I have a small network. Some of the folks that are talking out there, you go to their farms, it's not so, and that's troublesome. Um, so there's a little glitz and glimmer, and then when you show up at the farm, ooh, so vetting that out is pretty important, and then once you do, like, yeah, they're the real deal. Like a Greg Judy, like a Jordan Green, like a Brian Maloney, you know, it's easy to forward folks over there to learn from them. So that grazing one, again, starting grazing is still in this education bubble. When do you get to the math, Tom? When do you get to the math? We're supposed to be like grazing planning and numbers and what's all the math? How do we get in? Do we go there, or we're still?
Yeah, I
How do
think
you lay the foundation?
laying that foundation is going to be important. And to the question in the chat, there's tons of resources out there that I really love. I'm a huge fan of Story's Guide to Insert Livestock Animal. And it's a great book to start off with. I like to start off with the animal health side of things. Like, what do these animals actually have to eat to survive? How do they survive before you get to the next step of grazing, in my opinion. And that's why I'll talk to people about, hey, I just bought animals. What do I do now? Probably start over. Go ahead and sell all of them. Then come up with a plan and then buy them back when you're ready. And kind of going to workshops and getting ready in that way.
So we still need to do math, though. Usually
you do need to do math.
either it's a business plan or it's a forage allocation or stocking rate. There's still a lot of that prep. I feel like there's doing, but if I had to do it all over again, I would most likely prep better. I would do that education piece, and then I would again walk that land and get me in the context where I was heading instead of just willy-nilly in it. So again, the again I'm going to keep coming back to the right kind of help. So I have people in my life that really do help, and I have people in my life that are too technical. They're not seeing the bigger picture, and they'll tell you that plant is X, great, but they're a little too technical, and they're not hearing the context. And again, finding the right ingredients is important. But what do other people? How did they start? What's grazing? What's the first steps in other people's journeys, or what should we? We're trying to help farmers and ranchers start, right? Isn't that what Grazing 101 is? Start successfully, not start miserably.
Yeah, I love like Bill saying setting your goals and then starting small. I think I tell people all the time, start with, if you're going to do sheep, for example, start with 10 sheep. And then to Brian's point, develop a map. Where are you putting those animals and tracking where they go on the map and seeing what the land does at that point. Continue walking in it before you expand. And I think the map is probably one of the most important underutilized tools that we have in farming and ranching. It is both a way to track where your animals are. It's a way to track where your animals have been, but it's also a great way to plan if that work-life balance. Can you go on vacation? Where your animals are going to be? Where can the farm help do the things? And vacation's the fun way to talk about that. But what happens if you have a medical emergency and it's all in your head? And you can't dictate that plan anymore. If you don't have a map that's well labeled, how does somebody that's going to be managing your operation in that instance know where grandpa's pasture is or pasture E4 is? That's just a name that means nothing without a map. And Troy, like, how do you manage your maps, or what's your experience with maps?
People have terrible maps. and usually that conversation's a little ugly because they want to use a grazing chart, and the first question I come back with is, how's your map? And then you get that funny look like, well, it's in black and white, they copied it from something, or not well done. And even in that mapping, there's knowledge, there's soil types, there's draws, there's creeks, there's from space you can see a lot. And then that delineation of which fields are doing what, measuring, knowing where, again, roads are, and for somebody else, like you said, but it's, again, that's part of the plan. And maps can change. It's not like one and done. It's this continual journey of learning. So, and I wrote down over here because it's so important, is the with the mapping, the walking, the skill set. Again, we're supposed to be talking about math, but the skill set of observation is critical. And when you look, what are you observing? And then how are you capturing that somewhere. Is there data to capture, or a feeling, or take your camera and, you know, if it looks like this and you do a certain thing and it looks better, you know, a shovel, like we have so many tools in our toolbox, and we just we're the grazing journey starts with good habits. And in my lifetime, I had crappy habits. You know, I was running and doing something, and then I'd move the cows and run away, go work, do stuff. And it took a while to get that habitual, like when you're walking, you're kind of deliberate, you're enjoying it, you know, it should be fun. But getting those skills takes practice, and you can't learn them on YouTube. You got to get in the field.
Yeah, I was working with a producer, and one of their ranch rules is every time they open a gate to go into a pasture for their cattle is they have to take a picture. And that's a record keeping thing that they attach to their map on the system that they're using. And then to answer Haley's question in the chat, and then after we answer this, where do you get a good map from? I'd really like to open up the chat a little bit more to the others here, to what questions they have and stuff like that. I use Google Maps or Google Earth Maps, kind of like what Nick just said. And I keep them on the computer, move them around, label them, draw the outlines of my pastures, and I mark where all of the waterers are on that map. And it's super easy. It's interactive, and you can start over and change it whenever you want. I know a lot of people go to the NRCS or the FSA to get pretty good maps, but I really love Google Earth for that application.
And I use the same tool. There's GIS. There's some technology. It's the one thing about a map in your map that's, I think, is pretty important, is it's the way you want to measure. I mean, it's the way you want to farm and manage. So in my town here, FSA gave me a map. They don't delineate pastures. They only delineate crop fields. So I'm paying taxes on 100 acres of land, but they only gave me credit for 60. And I was like, what? There's all this other land. And so making the paddocks the shapes that I want, you know, I'm the driver of this, right? So I need a technical service provider that can help me make my maps, not their maps that I get. I drive the ship here. So again, how do I want to farm each field, or where do I want to put the fences, the crossings, and things of that nature? That mapping is all custom. And the beauty now with technology is almost every town or every city or county has some way to print them in color, you know, make them bigger. Most every agency has some sort of plotter. So I have a small one, and then I have a big one. So I have the big one in my office and the small one I carry around with me. And those maps also line up with my nutrient management plan that has all my fertility records and those types of things, and the grazing chart. But I have seen really bad mapping. They're functional, but they're not. They could be a lot better. And there's so much technology and people. I don't know why we don't do it more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm trying to see if I can pull up a map that I've created. It's simple. It's not letting me drop in the chat. But we can send it out to people via email after this. So Robert, we're probably going to have you come off mute because we're going to need context for your question. And kind of, you're taking over a 20-acre crop field and you want to transition it into pasture for grazing animals. and you want to know what grass feeds the plant. So first two questions, where are you located and what grazing animals are you thinking about?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I am in Western Massachusetts, Deerfield, the Connecticut River Valley. And we currently do a lot of poultry, and we're going to be expanding next year, trying to start to introduce sheep and cattle. So we can do multi-species grazing. So wanting to take over about a 20-acre land that's been in this year. It's parsnips, it's been corn, and kind of other big monoculture crops around here that grow a lot. So once they're done harvesting in this fall, I'll have access to it. So I'm trying to start to plan now in terms of what I want to seed in there in the fall, so things can start growing, and hopefully I can start to get animals on there next spring and summer.
So Troy, that's your area of expertise. I do have some timeline thoughts on that too, so I'll let you go first.
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there, even that little. I immediately was thinking about the seed bank. Is when you put a lot of poultry on something, and get them off, there's a lot of impact, and that seed bank will potentially come back. The other thing I was thinking is if it's crop fields, is there any residual pesticides or herbicides or any weird stuff? Is there any worms in the soil? And then, so if you've got a good seed bank of orchard grass or stuff that grows in Massachusetts, can you make that really help you? Because seed and tillage and getting it back is expensive. So the other part, which is super fun, I don't know, again, the speed at which you need this to be awesome. Some are seeding ahead of the animals and let the animals punch it in, whether it be sheep or chickens or whatever, to mitigate some of that tillage part, but you're going to have to up the seed rate. And in these questions, they're a little more difficult is, so what kind of grass do you want? Because you can buy all kinds of grass seed, you can get mixes, but really, if you spend a bunch of money, you're going to have to manage it to make the crop come alive. New seeding, if you pound it, it's going to take some time. I was thinking, you could roll bales out, you can do a lot of things, but these are all just suggestions and scenarios, and then you can put a pencil to each one, which is fun. I don't know the timetable exactly.
Yeah, I think that was one of the points that I was going to make too, Troy, is establishing pasture takes time, especially from cropland, or in cleared land as well. A lot of times I'll tell people realistically, you're looking at 3 years at least before you have a really productive pasture, but you can start sooner. One of the grasses, just to throw grass out there, that I really love in a transition situation like this is annual ryegrass, because it has a pretty thick root system that helps other grasses establish as well, and it grows quickly, and it's a great feed to start small with. Like in your situation, if you got 5 or 10 sheep grazing out there on ryegrass, you're still going to have to get some hay for the first little bit, but that's a good starting place. But also reaching out to your local extension office, they would be able to come out there, walk the land with you, and give you a tailored option for your specific farm as well.
I was also just going to add, try some shit. try seeding ahead of some animals. See if it takes. Try some cool, fun things with animal impact, and maybe keep a place where you just impact it and leave it. And if the orchard, we talked about this in West Virginia last week, how prevalent in the Northeast that grass just grows if you impact it. But it takes more time. And Tom was talking about the fertility level. I don't know what it is. Let's say that it was a little toughly farmed. If you don't have a lot of fertility, it's going to be hard to get that seed bank to really jump. So those are all, considerations. You can take all this with a grain of salt. How much money do you have to spend? That's the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm guessing the fertility is pretty low, just given the nature of the crop farming that's been going on this land for years. And part of the challenge with even getting, we use an adjacent piece of land. That's where our poultry have been, which is really thick grass and really, really high fertility at this point. But with the ground being as soft as it is, where it's been tilled, getting our chickens out there is just not really practical. So I like your, seeding ahead idea. That's a good one. And I understand that may take more time. I'm wondering if maybe, doing something a little bit more proactive in terms of seeding, direct seeding, for 5 or, 10 of the acres in the short run, and then kind of seeing what just naturally comes up on the rest of the field. Because certainly, to your point, 20 acres it's a lot and would be pretty expensive just in terms of overall seeding. So I am kind of balancing that as well. But really, I'd get something in there that would take over the winter, germinate, and then give me something to work off of, at least to do. I'm starting small to your point in terms of 10 sheep and 5 cows. So I certainly don't need most of this acreage next year.
Yeah, I would definitely start out with getting a soil sample if you don't know what the nutritional value is going on there. And I would try to talk to somebody, a mentor educational program where you really look at the carrying capacity that the land can have. Because starting off, it'll probably be difficult on that size to get 5 cows and 10 sheep on there successfully. So that kind of goes back to goals, plans, and making sure or back checking, talking to a mentor about what's realistic as well.
Well, I kind of like the scenario where you can start a few acres, then add some more instead of just going all 20 acres. So that you can set your stage up. And if you want to try a few things, and again, I don't know how the districts and things work. There's no-till drills available a lot at Solon Waters that you can rent. You can put in all kinds of different seed. You can put cover crop seed in if you're wanting to get the land covered, and then have something for spring grazing. But again, everything that we do costs money, and it's just a balancing. If I do nothing, here's what it will be. If I do this, or this, or this, or this, that fertility test is only $12. It's a great starting point. Or if you don't have $12, grab a shovel and dig a hole and see how the soil is. You probably can tell a lot by that too. So
I think a great step that's maybe not the next step, but definitely a step in the future is attending Troy's Ultimate Grazing School in New York in September.
Oh, boy, you dropped right that.
Good plug. Well, if you can share the information about that would be great.
Well, it is that brings up a great point. We have the part of that grazing school, and part of this observation is we can do a lot with animal impact. It's a tool that we can use to wield away weeds or any other thing we need to do. We can seed, and using that tool of impact can be calculated. So I just love it. Having the chance to utilize animals for a short duration and then see what happens. Everyone's doing it. It's like a thing. Plus that manure is buying fertility is expensive. So laying down poultry manure or any other impact would be really a good consideration. What else we got here?
Once you identified your grazable acres, what are the main variables to take into consideration when creating paddocks and building your grazing plan? I'll just hit this with a quick one is watching where the natural water goes. Like what are your wet spots? What are your dry spots? Is a huge part of that. Troy, I'll let you touch on that more too.
It's a great question. Yeah, I'm animal movement. So depending on the context, the animals have to come back. Are they dairy cows? Are, laneways? And then hills and valleys. Are you fencing them across the faces? And then trying to incorporate the waterways, either crossings. Maybe you don't have any. Do you have woods? Do you want to fence animals into the woods like silvopasture, or do you want to, especially if you're short on fertility, you want them doing their business out in the field? And so there's these natural, every land tells a story. What's the most advantageous for us here? We don't have any laneways anymore, because I can make a laneway with polywire back, but we always have to be considerate of animals going to the processor, or we have a veterinarian. We have a vet. We need to get them to the vets or something. Again, mixing. They talk about creating paddocks that have the same soil types. And the breaking that those paddocks up on contours. It's a science, when a lot of times when you buy a farm or you rent a farm, it's kind of fenced, in some way. And lots of times you don't like want to upset the apple cart, but sometimes you really need to. The problem is laying out paddocks. That's why virtual fence is becoming quite popular, because it took me a while to figure out where I really wanted a fence, like a subdivision fence that made sense. So polywire and things allowed me to create the paddocks and then see if I liked them. It took probably 10 years for me to build subdivision fences, because I just didn't feel like I wanted to be 5 to 10 acres. I wanted to manage something bigger and not have a bunch of 1 acre paddocks. So again, it's totally context related.
Yeah, I think to that point, I love a flexible system. I want something big and open that I can subdivide with temporary fencing, depending on what's going on with, if you're in a drought situation or if you have way too much rain, can you give them smaller or less space? When you start putting in permanent fence, that becomes a lot harder to do. So I personally love big open squares, or big open circles, depending if you have irrigated pasture in that situation. Also, the contours of the land, and then how far is your closest watering point. Can you run water to the farthest point of your pasture without spending $1 million or having to run, 500 feet of hose somewhere to successfully graze those animals? Because people often overlook how much water access will impact the grazability and the uniform grazability of the pasture. That's a great
Again,
question too.
that virtual fence is becoming quite where you can literally change. And we got into a discussion last week about not doing the same thing twice. So making those paddock sizes and that impact's very flexible and variable to provide the impacts that you want. So and then of course over here, we do a fair bit of machinery work. So having something bigger has been a tendency of ours instead of something smaller. Do you have an opinion, Mr. Maloney? I know you're creating paddocks 4 times a day.
I don't know if I'm an expert on this. I'm started fencing in 1990, and some of my farm is the third time I've refenced it. So I don't know if that means I've done a really good job, but that also would mean that what we're grazing has changed. We started with a lot of custom grazing and cow-calf pairs, and we developed our pastures with them. And so now we're finishing a lot more animals. So we break down the paddock smaller. So that's kind of what we're doing there now. And we did kind of like what you're saying. We made big blocks and then we subdivided it. But now we're making more permanent fencing throughout those big blocks just to make it a little bit easier, and we can manage the groups a little bit tighter to have better utilization. We're refencing 40 acres, and I figure we probably get at least 10 or 12 more days of grazing out of that just by making it a little bit tighter. So, it pays off. But I never would make any major subdivisions without at least a season or two of polywire.
Yeah, completely agree. And then knowing what animals you want to hold in too is super important. If you don't want to make fence multiple times, make your fence as strong as the most difficult animal you think you will ever keep in there. If you think there's a chance that you're going to put a goat in there, you might as well make it look like Fort Knox, and have it nice and tight and buttoned. If you're only ever going to put horses in there, you don't have to have as sturdy of a fence.
Yeah. There's so much to consider. There's never one answer, and that's again the beauty that we're talking about tonight is a buddy system of some sort. Because when you're sitting out there trying to make a decision alone, it's tough because I know this is I'm going off the grazing chart saga, but there's this connotation that people don't want to do it wrong, so they don't do it at all. I don't know, and maybe I'm more risk. I'm more of a risk taker, but folks would rather not do it if it meant that they were wrong. And really, there's no wrong answer. You got to kind of have enough confidence and grit just to do it. Maybe thinking that it's not quite the best, but just go ahead and do it anyway. So again, those paddock shapes and things will all change. In fact, I'm fixing fence now because the tree went down, and I'm looking at it going, maybe I should put another subdivision in. So there, you're always learning, always learning. Uh-oh, Haley's on. That must mean something.
Well, if we want to address, Cindy put something in the chat. I have an existing pasture running beef cattle. The last couple of years, it's gone backwards. I'm considering virtual fence for managed grazing, but where can I find out about improving plant health? I know certain plants can tell you a lot about what is happening in your soil. However, I need to learn more about how to increase soil and plant health. Do y'all have any really recommendations for Cindy?
First thing that comes to my mind is getting a soil sample through a soil sampling service or an extension service to see what your actual nutrition that you have going on in there is. And one of my favorite indicator species that tells us a lot is called broom sedge. And it'll tell us if our soil is acidic, which often is one of the major limiting factors of plant growth. And then I would also look at the number of head that you're running on that property to see if it's going backwards, maybe it's too much.
And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat for, we do have a free ebook on the NatGLC website called Grazing 101. And there's a really great section on soil health and tools for soil health. But just to kind of wrap things up, Tom and Troy, please reach out to them if you have any questions. I dropped their links to their bios in the chat, but you can reach out to their email addresses, tom@grazinglands.org and troy@grazinglands.org. And thank you both for and Brian and Nick and everybody that contributed today. Thank you for this great conversation around Grazing 101. And I think it calls for a Grazing 102. So,
So
and we all kind of decided that
we don't even know what that is yet, but we're gonna figure it out.
Send us
Yeah.
emails about what you want us to talk about next.
That's a great idea. Yes. So if you want to continue this conversation, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and keep an eye out for future events and resources at grazinglands.org. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for your participation, and y'all have a wonderful evening. Take
Thank you.
care. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.